Story 1. He could tell I was nervous as it was the first time I was pulled over. He said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to put you in handcuffs." To which I replied, "Well, it would be kind of difficult," and lifted up the sleeve of my amputated arm. Story 2. I told him I really needed to use the bathroom, and honestly, the panicked look on my face probably sold it more than my words. He just sighed and said, "Drive safe. Then let me go." Story 3. No excuses. Tell the truth, and some police officers will let you off with a warning. I had one California Highway Patrol officer tell me, "I wasn't going to pull you over at all because I'm on my way off shift, but the way you kept speeding for 12 miles without ever noticing me behind you is annoying. But you're the only person today to tell me the truth, so I'm letting you off with a warning." Story 4. Not exactly an excuse, but a trooper talked himself into giving me a warning and I wasn't about to dissuade him. I was going like 8 over when he made a U-turn behind me and the lights came on. "What's the hurry tonight?" Just ready to be home from work. "It smells like food in here." "What's that?" "Oh, I've got a couple of pizzas in the back. Dinner for the family, huh?" It's not my problem if he felt sympathy for me feeding a couple of hungry kids when it was just my significant other and me. Story 5. I saw him while I was speeding and pulled myself over. He showed up to my window and said, "Never had someone pull themselves over before," and gave me a warning. Story 6. My wife got pulled over on our way to the hospital. She was 7 months pregnant, and we were on our way to a labor and delivery class at the hospital. She insisted on driving because she thinks I'm a slow driver when she's mad. Anyways, we got pulled over. She's losing her mind and freaking out while we're waiting for the police officer. I start laughing. She asks how I can do that. I say, "You're a pregnant woman speeding less than a mile from a hospital. You're not getting a ticket." Long story short, the police officer lets us go. Story 7. I said I know I was going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, and I was wrong, and I am so sorry. The police officer told me that all night people were denying it or having an attitude. She said she appreciated my honesty and let me go. Story 8. I just kind of kept my mouth shut and looked innocent, he said, and I quote, "If you were going to drive like a fool, do it at night when there are fewer people around." He slammed my door and walked off back to his vehicle. Story 9. Not an excuse, but my dog popped her head out of the window. He gave me a verbal warning. He spent a good 8 or 9 minutes just loving on my girl. Story 10. I wouldn't try this now. I've lost my lying superpowers. I got pulled over by a Maryland state trooper for a radar trap. I was 12 miles per hour over the speed limit. He asked me if I knew how fast I was going. I said, "No, but you must have clocked me a half a mile or so back. I'm having a heck of a time with my gas pedal sticking." He asked me to step out of the vehicle. I thought, I'm screwed. Next, he took hold of the gas pedal and moved it around a bit. The officer said, "I can see it sticking slightly. You need to have that fixed right away." Then he gave me directions to a mechanic. Phew. Story 11. I got pulled over for speeding, but when he got to the window, he could smell the weed I had bought. So the speeding was no longer the issue. He took my weed, grinder, and the pipe I had never used, gave me a warning for speeding, and then I asked if I could get my grinder back because I had it for 10 years. He gave me a funny look and walked away. I was sad but knew it was how it was. He came back to the car and said, "Remember what I did for you today?" He opened my grinder, tapped out the weed in it, and gave it to me. To say I was surprised would be an understatement. It was so kind. When I got home, I saw that he didn't tap out all the tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, in the bottom part of the grinder, so I still had something. But I will never forget what he did for me that day. He was rather chill for a police officer and didn't have to give it back to me. I don't even smoke nowadays, but his kindness was super cool, and I'll never forget. Story 12. I was going a little too fast and didn't have my seatbelt on. I saw a speed trap a little too late and audibly screamed, "Fudge," and immediately pulled over. He drove over and was laughing because he read my mouth. He told me to put my seatbelt on and drive slower. Guess, I was really young. I always wear my seatbelt now. Story 13. He made the excuse for me. I was in uniform heading to work as a paramedic. He pulled me over, and as soon as he walked up to the window, he said, "Well, I guess I'll need you if I ever get shot." Then started laughing, gave a wave, and walked back to his car and drove off. Story 14. He walked up to me, and I recognized him from having stopped me about a month prior. So I said, "You stopped me before." He obviously thought I was a complete idiot. He asked me if I knew anything about baseball, to which I replied, "Third strike, you're out. Don't let me catch you again." He let me off with a warning. I haven't seen him again, so when? Story 15. Officer pulled me over. Before he said anything, I asked, "Morning, officer. Mind me asking how long you've been sitting there?" He proceeded to say, "About 30 minutes. Why?" I told him, "Well, that's good. I didn't want you to be waiting for too long, so I got here as fast as I could." Couple of chuckles. No ticket. Story 16. Saw him as I crested a rise. Looked down, and I was going 92 in a 65. I saw him start to move, and I just pulled over. When he came up to the car, he said, "I've never had someone pull over so quickly." I said, "I know I was speeding. You know I was speeding. I wasn't going to make you chase me several miles down the road." I told him I just wasn't paying close enough attention to my speed. He let me go and just said to drive safely and pay more attention to how fast I'm going. Story 17. My dad's friend bought a new Ferrari. Shortly thereafter, he was driving it down the Edens Expressway, Interstate 94, north of Chicago. He got it up to about 130 and saw flashing lights in his rearview mirror. He slowed down and let the police officer catch up to him. When the officer got to his window, he said, "I could subtract the speed limit from how fast you were going, and you still would have been going 30 over." My dad's friend put on his most winning smile and said, "I'm sorry, officer. I just wanted to see why they charged me so much money for this car." The officer had him pop the hood so he could see the engine and gave him a warning. Story 18. I told the police officer I was a little distracted and needed to get my son home. The police officer aimed his flashlight at the back seat. My son stared back, wide-eyed, stripped down to his diaper with mud all over him. He had fallen into a mud puddle, so I took his wet clothes off. The police officer laughed and asked me to take it slower. No ticket. Story 19. I got pulled over for racing at a stoplight. The officer got me out of the car and assumed that I had something to drink prior to driving the car. He made me do the field sobriety test. He asked me if I had any medical conditions that would hinder this test. I told him that I had Osgood-Schlatter disease in my knees. The only reason I knew about this disease was because of my high school hockey teammate who was diagnosed and could not play anymore because of the bad knees. I told him that I could no longer do the balance testing because of this. The cop had no idea what I was talking about and just let me go. No breathalyzer or anything. Story 20. State trooper asked me if I knew how fast I was going in a 55. I told him I did not. It was 1:30 in the morning, and not a lot of traffic was on the road. He said I was doing 72 and wanted to know what the hurry was. I told him that it was the last day of work starting a 2-week vacation. My first since COVID-19 hit almost a year ago. He told me to slow down and enjoy the vacation. Could not believe it. Story 21. I took off my sweatshirt so he could see my t-shirt for the ambulance company I worked for. He scolded me for speeding because I should know better. I saw him at a big wreck the next day. He was right. 20 over the speed limit in a little car was excessive. Story 22. I told him that there was a bee in my car and that I am allergic to bees. I had a dead one that I used to show. It worked like 5 or 6 times before a police officer called me out on it because the bee looked like it had been dead for a while. Story 23. Not mine, but my dad's. He ran a red light and was pulled over for that. The police officer asked him, "Didn't you see the red light?" And he responded, "Yes, I did, but I didn't see you." Apparently, the police officer was in a good enough mood to let him go with just a warning. Story 24. I was getting a ride from a colleague and was pulled over by a state trooper. I still had my bunker gear on and showed him my hand, which had just gotten badly burned in a training fire as we were on the way to the emergency room. Needless to say, our interaction did not last long, and he gave us an escort. Story 25. I got pulled over by the sheriff of whatever county I was in, and when he asked why I was speeding, I was only going 8 miles over the speed limit. I told him I wasn't from this area and had never driven this way before, which was true. He let me go, plus I had my 4-year-old daughter with me, and he thought she was adorable. Story 26. I told him I knew I was speeding but really had to pee. He asked if I would like to go inside to pee before taking my information. I had pulled into a gas station after seeing his lights. I told him I was pretty sure seeing his lights scared the piss out of me. He laughed and gave me a warning. Story 27. I had COVID on my way back from the hospital. I just wanted to go home. It was the first couple of weeks of the first shutdown and I was scared. Luckily, so was the police officer. Literally told me to go home and drove off. Story 28. Back in college, I was going 80 in a 55 miles per hour on the New York State Thruway at around 5 a.m. I didn't see him on the side of the road until I had just passed him. I knew he got me. I was the only person for miles, so I immediately pulled over to the side of the road and turned off the car. He slowly pulled up behind me. I couldn't have been 1/10 of a mile from where he had been stopped. The first thing I said was, "You got me." He laughed and then thanked me for pulling over before he even had to turn on the lights. He ran my license and gave me a warning. Story 29. Admit it and just tell them I should have been going slower. I've been pulled over about 5 times in my life for speeding or other things. I've never gotten a ticket. I'm just polite and tell the truth. Always keep my hands where they can see them. Story 30. I have yet to be pulled over, but my mom got out of a ticket in a hilarious way. She was on her way to pick my brother and me up from school, as usual, bringing our pet rat, Rascal, with her. He was shoulder-trained and loved to hide in my mom's hair. She blew a stop sign and got pulled over. The cop was completely thrown for a loop when Rascal peeked out of her hair. All he said to Mom was, "Ma'am, do you know there's a rat in your hair?" He didn't even give her a warning. He just went back to his car and drove off. This was in the late 1990s. Story 31. I told him I did not realize it, and the rental I was in had an accurate speedometer while my truck is off, so I was used to it saying I was going faster than I was. I deserved a ticket since I was actually speeding, even though I didn't realize it or intend to. Story 32. I typically just always gave warnings as long as the drivers weren't complete jerks or endangering lives. If they argue or deceive, they definitely get a ticket. Story 33. Rolled down all windows, opened all closed compartments, turned on all lights, and had my hands on the wheel with both my license and registration in my grip while looking disappointed and depressed with myself. Law enforcement officer damn near gave me a hug and sent me on my way. Story 34. I just flat out told the officer the truth. I told him that I hit the snooze button way too many times until I just gave up and turned off the alarm. I told him that in the midst of getting ready for work, I made a poor decision of sitting back down to wake up a bit more. I leaned back and dozed off. I woke up to my coworker calling me. I was the designated opener of the store and the only one with the key and alarm codes that was scheduled that day. Needless to say, I quickly got up, finished getting ready, darted out of the house, and sped all the way to work. I told the officer that most of the morning crew were already there, all outside in the rain and snow, waiting for me, and I'm their opening manager. He let me go on one condition. He said, "Follow me and try to keep up." He went back in his patrol car, turned on the lights and siren, and pulled out into the road with me right behind him. It's a good thing I got pulled over 8 blocks away from my work. I wouldn't have been able to keep up with him. Story 35. When he claimed I was doing 15 over and I replied, "No, sir, I was doing 5 over. I was watching my speedometer." He replied, "Oh, I was 16 at the time." Story 36. Working in cancer research, I had a meeting with a doctor to go over a new protocol. I was driving 110 miles per hour in a 55 zone when a police officer pulled me over. I told him I had a meeting with a cancer doctor in an hour. I could have been arrested on the spot. Instead, He got a funny look on his face, ran my plates and license, and wrote me a ticket for going 20 over. He parted by saying good luck. So I didn't get out of a ticket, but I did stay out of jail. Story 37. Told him the truth. I was distracted. I was on my way into the city with my dog going to the veterinarian. I was speeding almost 30 kilometers over. He took pity on me and gave me a warning. Guess it helps that I've only received one speeding ticket in like 15 years. Story 38. My father was military, so I have United Services Automobile Association car insurance. I got pulled over for speeding, gave the officer my insurance card, and he glanced at it, then gave it back and said, "I really respect the troops, ma'am," before letting me off with a warning. Story 39. I was doing 120 miles per hour and got pulled over. I told the truth. The hospital was basically shut down due to a network outage, no electronic medical records, half of everything was offline, and I was trying to get there as soon as possible. The officer ended up escorting me to the hospital. In the second incident, I was trying to get around a long stretch of traffic merging onto the highway so I could get to an airport exit. I hit the gas a bit and was caught doing 104. When the officer got to my window, he first asked me about my license plate, which is a vanity plate, and what it meant. I explained what I did and my work with local, federal, and international law enforcement and military. He gave me a warning. My plate has gotten me out of a few tickets because I get asked about it probably 75% of the time, and when you can talk about helping to put away pedophiles or disrupt organized crime, it goes well.